Good morning, kids. It's Mr. Coyne with District 65, one of the school social workers. And today is Doggy Loo Storytime. And Doggy Loo, we have a special guest today with us that's going to read a kid's story, Miss Marta May.
Hi!
Thank you for doing this, neighbor.
Of course, of course.
Before we get started, just a quick reminder, kids, that if we are going to light any candles, always follow the 8 never never rule, which is never play with fire. So if your parents let you use a match and light a candle, make sure they are with you and you're watching the flame the whole time. Never leave a lit candle in the room by itself. There we go. So kids, what we're going to do is hear a really fun story about a moose. So I'm kind of excited. I don't know anything about it. But when we're done with the moose story, if it's okay, Miss Marta May, we might introduce the kids to a few what I call Evanston heroes that have been helping this week as we're on our quarantines and in our homes. Mm-hmm. Well, kids, it's time to settle down. So please, body still, ears listening, eyes focused, and voices quiet. Thanks, Miss Marta May.
All right, we're going to read a story. This story is called Thidwick, the Big-Hearted Moose, and written and illustrated by Dr. Seuss. All righty. Up at Lake Winnebago, the far northern shore, lives a huge herd of moose, about 60 or more, and they all go around in a big, happy bunch, looking for nice, tender moose moss to munch. Up at Lake Winnebago one day, they were lunching, just strolling along and enjoying their munching. For the moose moss that day was especially fine, when it happened that Thidwick, the last moose in line, saw a binglebug sitting. The bug called out, "Hey, it's such a long road, and it's such a hot day. Would you mind if I rode on your horns for a way?" "Of course not," smiled Thidwick, the big-hearted moose. "I'm happy my antlers can be of some use. There's room there to spare, and I'm happy to share. Be my guest, and I hope that you're comfortable there." So the binglebug picked out a nice easy seat, and the moose went on looking for some moose moss to eat. Well, an hour or so later, the bug heard a squeak, and then he heard a small voice of a tree spider speak. "I say," said the spider, "you've got a fine place. That moose seems quite friendly, has such a nice face. If I got on too, do you think he would mind?" "Hop aboard," laughed the bug. "And I think you'll find that the moose won't object. He's the big-hearted kind." "I accept," said the spider with joy and delight, and he started a web on the horn to the right. While the spider was spinning, he heard a gay song, and a fresh little zinazoo bird came along. He stopped, and he stared, and he chirped, "Well, well, well! What a smart place to build! What a great place to dwell! I've been living on trees ever since I was born. But here's something new. Why not live on a horn? If there's room for 2, then there's room for 3. There's plenty of room, laughed the bug, and it's free. Thidwick stopped walking. What was all that talking? These guests had caught Thidwick the moose unawares. Hey, he called out, what goes on there upstairs? Just building a nest, sir, the Zinazoo said, and began yanking hairs out of poor Thidwick's head. And he plucked out exactly 204. Don't worry, he laughed. You can always grow more. Then he dozed off to sleep in his fine moose hair nest. This bird, murmured Thidwick, is sort of a pest. But I'm a good sport, so I'll just let him rest. For a host, above all, must be nice to his guest. Besides, now it's getting quite late in the day, and surely tomorrow they'll all go away. But alas, the next morning, the sun's early light brought to Thidwick's sad eyes a most unwelcome sight. Meet my wife, said the bird. I was married last night. And perhaps, by the way, I should mention to you that her uncle is coming to live with us too. You're a very fine host, so I knew you'd be willing. Oh, no. Then Uncle said, a woodpecker started in drilling. Oh, no. All Thidwick's friends shouted, get rid of those pests. I would, but I can't, sobbed poor Thidwick. They're guests. Guests indeed, his friends answered, and all of them frowned. If those are your guests, we don't want you around. You can't stay with us, 'cause you're just not our sort. And then they all turned their backs and walked off with a snort. Oh. Now the big friendless moose walked alone and forlorn, with 4 great big woodpecker holes in his horn. What holes? Whispered Herman. A squirrel who spied 'em. What holes to hide nuts in? Mind if I tried 'em? They're yours, called the woodpecker. Get right inside 'em. This big-hearted moose runs a public hotel. Bring your nuts, bring your wife, bring your children as well. So the whole squirrel family all jumped on, pell-mell. Oh, look at all of them. Oh my goodness. And the very next thing the poor animal knew, a bobcat and turtle were living there too. Now what was the big-hearted moose going to do? Well, what would you do if it happened to you? You couldn't say scat, 'cause that wouldn't be right. You couldn't shout scram, 'cause that isn't polite. A host has to put up with all kinds of pests, for a host, above all, must be nice to his guests. So you'd try hard to smile, and you'd try to look sweet, and you'd go right on looking for moose moss to eat. But But now it was winter, and that wasn't easy. For moose moss gets scarce when the weather gets freezy. The food was soon gone on the cold northern shore of Lake Winnebago. There was just no more. And all Thidwick's friends swam away in a bunch to the south of the lake where there's moose moss to munch. He watched the herd leaving, and then Thidwick knew he'd starve if he stayed here. He has to go too. They're all going. He stepped in the water. Then, oh, what a fuss! Stop! Screamed his guests. You can't do this to us! These horns are our home, and you have no right to take our home to the far distant side of the lake. Be fair, Thidwick begged with a lump in his throat. We're fair, said the bug. We'll decide this by vote. All those in favor of going, say aye. All those in favor of staying, say nay. Aye, shouted Thidwick. But when he was done... Nay! They all yelled. He lost 11-1. Oh. We win, screamed the guests, by a very large score. And poor, starving Thidwick climbed back to the shore. Then, do you know what those pests did? They asked in some more. Oh, nay. They asked in a fox who jumped from the trees. They asked in some mice, and they asked in some fleas. They asked a big bear, and then, if you please, came a swarm of 362 bees. Oh, look at all those bees. Poor Thidwick sank down with a groan to his knees. And then came something that made his heart freeze. Look at all these people on his back. Bullets came zinging right past Thidwick's face. Guns were banging all over the place. Get that moose! Get that moose! Thidwick heard a voice call. Fire again and again, and shoot straight, one and all. We must get his head for the Harvard Club wall. Oh, no. Thidwick took to his heels with that load on his head. With 500 pounds on his horns, the moose fled. He could have run faster without all those pests, but a host above all must be nice to his guests. Up canyon, off cliff, over wild rocky trail, with bullets bouncing around him like hail. Up a gully through gulch and down slippery sluice, with his hard-hearted guests raced the soft-hearted moose. Oh. Then finally they had him. Because of all those pests, he had run out of luck. Because of all those guests on his horn, he was stuck. He gasped. He felt faint, and the whole world grew fuzzy. Thidwick was finished, completely. Or was he? not. It's true, he was in the most terrible spot, but now he remembered a thing he'd forgot. A wonderful something that happens each year to the horns of all moose and the horns of all deer. Today was the day Thidwick happened to know. That old horns came off so that new ones can grow. And he called to the pests on his horns as he threw 'em. You wanted my horns? Now you're quite welcome to 'em. Keep 'em, they're yours. As for me, I shall take myself to the far distant side of the lake. Look at those horns, they came right off. And he swam Wanabingo and found his old bunch and arrived just in time for a wonderful lunch at the south of the lake where there's moose moss to munch. Oh, all of his friends got new ones too. His old horns today are where you knew they would be. His guests are still on them, all stuffed, as they should be. And that's the end. Ugh, what a good story. I've never read that one before.
Miss Marta May, thank you so much to reading to our kids.
Of course.
Our Doggy Loo always loves to learn a little bit about the readers. Mm-hmm. Is it okay if I ask a couple questions that he has?
Yeah.
Were you ever in kindergarten or first grade, were you ever a little girl? And did people like your parents ever read to you?
Yeah. I was a little girl one day. And my parents used to read to me all the time. Yeah. I loved reading before I went to bed. I loved the Roald Dahl books when I got older. Those were my favorite. Yeah.
And
BFG.
Doggy Loo is wondering now, are you in college and are you learning?
I am in college. I go to school in downtown Chicago, and I get to study theater, which is my passion, and I get to do that because I went to all my classes and I did all my homework, and then I got to go and do the thing I love to do. So,
Miss Marta May, Doggy Loo heard that you have on the television just a few Evanstonians for the kids to meet. Now, I don't think they're mooses or mises.
I know they're not. They're just humans like us.
But they're from Evanston,
Mm-hmm.
and they're kind of like our friend who is helping others in need.
Mm-hmm.
These last 2 weeks and maybe the next 2 more, there are people in our community that need help. Some of them are homeless people, and some are just people that are nervous, and some are medically ill.
Yeah.
And it takes people like our friend the moose to help them as long as it's not too much. Mm-hmm. So we encourage all of our Evanston helpers to have balance, to rest well, drink a lot of water, and do all the distance safety that they can. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to show some of those friends that you brought with you on our television. This first one, it's a man in a van. And this man in a van, his name is Rob Beatty. And Marta knows him because that's her daddy.
Yep, that's my dad.
And he helped a homeless family move over this weekend, and he's inside the moving truck, but he's being very careful with gloves on and mask. Thank you very much, Mr. Rob, for being one of our Evanston heroes. Our next slide is of another person. And this is somebody I know, Miss Emily. She is my wife and the mother of our children. And she's a medical provider. She is the clinic manager of an OB-GYN office in Evanston. When little babies are growing in our mommies, just like all of us were, it's important to have doctors and medical people help you to make sure that the mommy's safe and that the baby's safe. And in that situation, these medical providers like Miss Emily have to go to work, just like all of us. But it's a little risky, but they're trying to be very safe. But we all need to think about those here in Evanston that go to the different hospitals, and our first responders, our fire department and police department, and the nurses aides, and all the people that supply the medical supplies. There's really a whole medical village that helps. And so part of the reason I think all of us are staying inside and trying to be safe during this virus situation is so that medical providers like Miss Emily don't get overworked like our moose friend. They need to rest as well and be safe. And I'll show you another slide. Here it is. And this one's actually a little movie of a person named Marcus. Can we meet Marcus, Miss Marta May?
Absolutely.
Hey, good morning, Marcus.
Good morning.
How did you sleep last night, man?
Great, great.
Hey, we're doing a few clips of heroes in Evanston. You know, our police department, our fire department, our mayor, elected officials, our Northwestern Hospital, North Shore Hospital, all the medical people helping out. But also, I consider you, Marcus, one of our local heroes.
Thank you, thank you.
And the reason is, I understand that you're here at this homeless shelter through the Connections for the Homeless in Evanston.
Yes, sir.
And you and I kind of got connected through, was it Northwestern's hospital?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Can you tell a little bit about that story? What happened last week?
What happened was I was at the hospital and I just wanted to get tested like everybody else. And what had happened was I went in, the doctor said, we're just going to test you. I was like, okay, no problem. So he tested me, and then I said, so what's the results? He's like, you got to wait 2 days. So I waited. I haven't got the results back yet in 2 days. So what happened was, in 2 days, still haven't got the results. I haven't called the hospital yet, but he told me I had an orientation for a job. And he said, if you go to that orientation, you know, if you affect people at that orientation, what will happen is you'll be charged for...
Because you had that virus.
Right.
Oh, so they wanted you on quarantine.
Yes, sir. They wanted me on quarantine.
So this is last week, right? Friday.
Yeah. No, Friday before.
Oh, Friday before. This is Friday now.
Right.
And I met you last week, Friday.
Last week, yes, sir.
And you moved in to this really nice donated little impromptu storefront shelter in Evanston that the owner donated.
Yes, sir.
And I think is it the Evanston Connections for the Homeless has been getting you food and making sure you're okay and far no symptoms, correct?
No, no.
And one reason why I think you're a hero, not only did you save lives by paying attention to your doctor, Marcus, but here you are helping me every day getting all this donated furniture from families giving to the Connections for the Homeless. We're getting beds and chairs, desks and dolls and kids' toys. And here you are, Marcus, in your quarantine, helping move all this stuff.
Yes, sir.
And may I just say on behalf of all of Evanston, thank you for being one of the heroes in our town, Marcus.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Be well.
So kids, you see, heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Now, we're going to close now, and we'll see you again on Monday with a different reader and a different story. Continue, if you can, to try to make our world better. And let's all say good luck and thank you to Miss Emily as she drives over to the Evanston Hospital to help pregnant women stay healthy. Thank you, Miss Emily, and all our medical providers.